All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Speaking Bluntly podcast. This is Carlos, and I'm here with co-host Kim, and we're very excited to be delivering. Now, just to give you a heads up, we have switched our podcast time. We typically delivered our podcast on Thursdays, but we are switching it because my son's wrestling schedule, the next 2 months are like Thursdays are just bad. So, Kim, I appreciate your flexibility with that. So Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Mountain time, right? Did I say that right? Yeah.
You really
You
squeezed
can,
that one out.
yeah, you can catch us live here. So make sure, just real quick, just want to thank our show sponsors again. Please go jump into. You can check out the Pipeline Strategies. You can visit their website as my phone is going off, and I need to silence that. Sorry about that. Go check out their website at thepipelinestrategies.com, and also their Facebook page as well. So we appreciate the sponsorship there. And Kim, with her, she's the editor-in-chief at the Harvest Plume magazine, and then we can't forget about the Cannabis sessions as well. So, Kim, welcome to another edition, and how are you today?
I'm good. It's another full plate. Honestly, I can't believe it's the end of January.
It's crazy. Where did January go, right?
Seriously, I want to keep writing like January 5th. You know, what happened?
And I've noticed that people are confused. Like at the end of the year, everyone's writing. I just write 20, and some people are doing the full 2020. And I'm like, do you really have to do that? Let me think about that for a minute. 87. No, I think, we can write 20. I think it's perfectly fine.
I think we're past that threshold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Hey, well, I appreciate your change in the schedule this week. And there are a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. One of the things that I discovered, I actually received a notification regarding this, and perhaps we can put this, I didn't do the share screen yet. We can put this into the link so that people can go check this out. I do want to share that there was a recent big hearing on Capitol Hill in regards to cannabis policies. And it's basically the entire conversation in regards to what took place. There were FDA, there's a subcommittee there in the Energy and Commerce. They discussed everything ranging from legitimate use of medical cannabis to medical cannabis research, also veterans, marijuana freedom and the Opportunity Act. So just a whole entire deck of information. And I've delved into this just a tad bit. But I recommend everyone to go check this out. And there is language in there in regards to CBD cannabidiol, which we always will continue to keep our pulse on. You just never know what the FDA is going to do. And I can't remember her name, but she was specifically asked in regards to cannabidiol regulations, and said, now, does the FDA, with it being in a prescription medication and CBD being out there, does the FDA have the ability to go in and issue certain guidelines or mandates in regards to CBD? And she stated, yes, we do. So that's something, I think, Kim, that we just have to continue to keep our eye on, because again, we just don't know what the FDA is going to do. And then more importantly, if they do issue some type of regulation in regards to CBD, what specifically does that do to legal cannabis markets as it relates to certain products and all that kind of fun stuff? You know how it goes.
Yeah. And, interestingly, I don't even know if you know this. I'm finishing, of course, it's the end of January. So I'm finishing up the magazines for February 1st. And in the cannabis sessions, there are 3 reasons to celebrate in February. There's Black History Month, there's Women's History, and there's Marijuana Awareness. So I have, in my typical format fashion, I have the women taken care of, which, by the way, please, women in cannabis, submit your headshot, your logo, your information. Excellent. I'll get you in there. We're representing.
Yes.
But as I'm doing the section on Marijuana Awareness Month, there's another word, I'm sure, but frustrated and I guess exasperated.
Mm-hmm.
That when you go on, if you do a simple search, and I don't want to give these links out because they will give misinformation, and that's what's frustrating. So here we have Marijuana Awareness Month, and you do a simple little Google search for marijuana awareness, and what's going to come up are cannabis awareness and prevention.
Ha, interesting.
And again, I'm not going to say those links or those sources, but I did go through them. And these are professionally created presentations specifically for facilitators and teachers to give this information, which is about prevention. And you
Hmm.
start going through some of the minor details and you realize how skewed it is. So, um, going along with the link that you brought out, we need more real information, not stigmas, not belief systems. Give me some facts. This is why would you want to prevent cannabis? How about taking that argument, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because there is a lot of myth in regards to cannabis, and one of which is the favorite that you hear in states is that, well, cannabis is a gateway drug. We repeatedly hear that from our elected officials. We hear that through our legislatures, and that's actually a myth. And there is several data that's coming back, and the easiest one to point to, and I can just go ahead and do a screen share again because I think I posted this on one of our sites, so it may take me a minute to get to it, but it's actually in regards to states who have legalized cannabis and the fact that in those particular states, the opioid, either deaths or addiction has came back and actually been reduced. So this is from the Last Prisoner Project, which they're doing some. It's a new foundation that just got started. Is Steve D'Angelo? I always mistake his name. Steve D'Angelo. So this is his foundation. This is his effort to really to look at the injustice and the incarceration of minorities. So it's called the Last Prisoner Project, and this is a fact that 20 to 35% is the decrease in opioid overdose fatalities in states with legal cannabis. That is a pretty significant percentage decrease, Kim, that you can't deny that cannabis does help, and in particular kind of dispels the fact regarding the gateway. And when you really look at the facts regarding the opioid addiction and the heroin, what you find out is that opioids are the true, not only alcohol, but also the opioids, because what typically happens is that once people run out of the methods of either their doctor refusing to do prescription refills or they can't find it on the streets, that's when they turn to some more of the illicit stuff, the heroin, which leads to the fatalities and everything else like that. So that's a pretty key fact and something that we have to continue to educate the community, the legislatures in regards to cannabis.
Exactly. That's why I was so frustrated trying to get this information when pretty much the first couple of pages is all misinformation, misrepresentation, and feeds into that belief system that I think that's really our role here, is to create the elevated conversations that allow for factual information to come out. Um, so it's okay. So let's just be the messengers. I'll take it at that. But
Yeah.
I would like to say with the Last Prison Project, I may be I'm communicating with Mary Bailey, who time frame she's in Hawaii,
Okay.
but she's the director of the Last Prison
Oh,
Project,
neat.
and we may have a partnering opportunity. And I'll
Awesome.
be talking to you about that person
You know,
another time.
awesome. It would be very cool, but I do have, because when I was at the MJ BizCon, I was participating in one of the podcast studios. In the studio sitting right next to me was Steve D'Angelo doing a podcast next to me.
Yeah.
And as much as I wanted to go over there and interrupt, I was all excited. And whenever he finished up the podcast, I was thinking, well, at least do a selfie with him. But I don't want to call him a handler, but his PR person was like, hey, he's late to get to another appointment. We're so sorry, but let me give you his card and you can contact if you ever want to do a podcast. It'd be interesting to reach out to him and see if he would want to do something like that. I think that'd be pretty neat to share that information.
I really think he is such a gracious person. Because I think once you reach that level of notoriety, I mean, he has quite like if you were as a conference goer, you always have all those ribbons,
Yep.
his would be like a train,
Right. Right.
have little
Right.
train bears holding all of his accolades. But I think that he's just such a gracious person, and that extends over to his representative, who because I'm sure you've probably seen a few as well, where those people can be really rough with you.
Sure.
So that's a great representation for all of Steve D'Angelo's brands and partnerships and collaborations.
It's quite extensive. It definitely is, and it's great to see him continue the advocacy. So even though he's done a lot for the advancement of legalization of cannabis, he's taking another look to say, well, let's take a look at the incarceration rate. Let's take a look at what things can be done. So that's what's really unique about that program and exciting. It's interesting. Kim, that I live in Indiana, which probably is a non-cannabis, state. They do allow CBD. And it's interesting because the legislative session just began, and they're actually looking at removing prosecution of certain amount of cannabis, so like 1 ounce or less. That if you're and even the state attorney general supports that, or at least the city does. The city of Indianapolis is the first one that came out and support that and say, hey, you know what? All these prosecutions, they end up clogging up the court system and everything else involved. These are petty, they're victimless crimes that occur. And instantly, what we're starting to see in the news cycle, especially here in Indianapolis, is they always state that people are driving under the influence of cannabis, and that's what's the scary part. And how often have we heard that, right? Of that, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not that naive. But when you take a look at the statistics and you take a look at the data, you don't have to look very far with alcohol to see the impact of how many people are killed a day in the United States due to alcohol. I know it's significant. I haven't looked it up lately. I guess we could play around if we wanted, but I know even if that, you take a look at accidents and everything else like that, the DUIs, that's truly some of the culprit that we don't address. It's perfectly legal, and it's out there for people to purchase and consume and all that.
What's interesting about that, and I do remember seeing, I'm sure it was through social media, some links about, excuse me, they did some type of a study or a research and said, no, that cannabis does not influence you, or, the THC, maybe it was a focus on THC, but it does not affect your ability to drive. But I will say, well, hold on now, because you have indica, you have sativa, and they do serve different purposes. And indica, of course, indicouch is going to give you that heavier feeling. I could see that if you were heavily sedated on indica. But then again, wouldn't that be kind of the same thing as driving on NyQuil?
Right.
So I mean, yes, I'm sure on the caution, do not operate heavy machinery and blah blah blah. But that's the caution that they put on it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't operate heavy machinery while consuming this consumable.
Right. Nope. Yeah. Good point. Let's turn our attention a little bit to some of the national conversation. And it's not necessarily a political one, but I think it's something to take a look at. And he's gaining a lot of traction in national polls. I believe Joe Rogan just endorsed him. And I think this is one reason why, is because Senator Bernie Sanders has really put himself out there in terms of cannabis, and stating that, again, it's a lot more than legalization. It's a matter of justice, and that resonates with a lot of our community, Kim.
I totally agree. From a personal perspective, politically, I'm not anything, but from a personal perspective, I adore him. Kind of like a cuddly little scratchy porcupine. You just, I think that he's perfect to come out with his voice, not his accent. I'm talking about his narrative. Is I feel it takes away a lot of the partisan surrounding those themes, and he focuses on the people. I mean, if you look at his criminal record, he's been arrested, I don't know, 10 times, 12 times, something like that.
Probably. Yeah.
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 And so you talk about someone who gets down with the people and he's concerned about how can we improve communities and whatnot. I have a high regard for him, and I appreciate how he delivers his narrative.
Sure, sure. Well, and again, I think if you take a look at the majority of candidates, and we hear it quite often that yes, we want legalization, yes, we support it, but when it comes time to actually supporting these bills as they move through the House and onto the Senate, that's where they typically get stalled. They get parked because special interest kicks in, the lobbyists kick in, and then boom, all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe we can't do this, which really I think doesn't do anything to help, considering the landscape of what's happening now across the U.S. And I would need to go to an upsided tracker site to see how many states have proposals that are out there, but then more importantly, how many have passed. And it's all around you. You just can't escape it. I think every state that you look at, they have some type of a bill or something that's in consideration right now.
Exactly. And that's what I appreciate about Bernie Sanders is that he keeps talking about it with regard to the people's perspective. How can we improve someone's ability to improve his or her life, his or her situation, economically, health, emotionally, all those areas, as opposed to when the bills are a lot of times like coming. I'm originally from Ohio, so but I haven't lived there in a long time. But everyone else I know lives there. And when Ohio was voting on it, I was totally confused. Why are you not supporting this issue? And they said because they had it written into it that there were going to be a monopoly, only three growers, and and that when you take the focus away from the people, look what happens.
Uh-huh.
And we're
Yep.
all fighting and creating all this stuff over here. And meanwhile, you got Bernie over there saying, come on, let's make it better for the people.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And also, I wanted to share, there was an article that you had placed up on Harvest and Plume. And let me bring this up because I thought this was pretty cool. Let me get the screen share going again. And it's funny. I have so many tabs open. I look across the top and I can't find the right one.
Like a rainbow.
It is. It is. It's like, oh gosh, look at that. Okay, so let's go to this real quick. And I thought this was very interesting. It's women ditch city life and move off grid and grow cannabis on their animal filled farm. That's a pretty neat little story there.
As soon as I read that, and they're from the UK, by the way,
Oh,
as soon
okay.
as I read that, I thought, this is very similar to hemp communities in terms of, not that we're, yeah, you might not want to scroll all the way down on that picture.
Okay. Okay. I'll
If there are
cut it out right there.
they have a couple of sexy shots on there, but if you read the article, basically they're saying, hey, we don't mind getting dirty. You can be dirty and sexy at the same time. This is about living sustainably. So they kind of take it tongue in cheek, and that ends up with that picture if you scroll down. Anywho,
Gotcha.
But talking about how they don't necessarily, they want to not have to swim in traditional society. They have already done it, and they felt and what most people say is, I felt the enslavement and I was totally trapped by my job, by my bills, by my status, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And when they exited it, they found that they were challenged, but they rose above those challenges and realized, I don't need to have Prada shoes. I don't need to have this. There are other things that were more important in their lives. And from the hemp community's perspective, it's very similar. How many people don't want to be attached to traditional society, but they still want access?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh no. Great points. Absolutely. One of the other things I wanted to discuss with you today is that I know that with upcoming, like, it's difficult for people sometimes to understand this, but when we take a look at the current state of the economy and you consider our industries that we're in, everyone keeps saying bring back all these industries to the US, and which I completely support, bringing jobs back. The challenge thing that people need to understand is that some of those industries that they want to move back, there's not necessarily the infrastructure there to improve all these things, or automation, technology, and everything to take place. And to me, that's why I think at this era of where we in with the changing dynamics of technology, with it eliminating so many jobs. I can't tell you. I think the other day I went to this one grocery store, and I don't think there was any cashier there working. It was all the automated transactions. They had two people just standing out in front, making sure that people were getting through. The retail stores now that Walmart's developing the self-stocking machine that will actually restock the shelves and checks the inventory, and all these things, this technology being developed. And that's why I think that in terms of the pipeline strategies, in terms of Harvest and Plume, the cannabis sessions, and being able to amplify that message of the marketplace and the shifting dynamics of the space is, that, don't get caught up just in, just the growing concept. And I know you probably have some things to say in regards to like the marketing perspective. That's a whole angle in terms of creating content and doing some of those things. So why don't you share for our listeners a little bit about what you do with the pipeline strategy? It's been a minute, because I think it is important work that you're doing with your company.
Thank you very much. Honestly, that was very unexpected.
Well, it's easy
Let me talk
conversation
about
for you.
myself. So the pipeline strategies, that was born from the pipeline recruiting. But the pipeline strategies is now my primary brand. And I realized that through recruiting and talent acquisition, that really there is more of a people strategy to companies and brands. And it comes down to three things: attracting, recruiting, and retaining all of their ideal professionals. And my background is in human resources, training and leadership development, and recruiting, talent acquisition, consulting. So when you start it at first it was frustrating because you talk to a recruiting client and those people say, I have an empty job, fill it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's recruiting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a difference between recruiting and talent acquisition. And from a talent acquisition perspective, when you hear someone say, oh, well, I think we're just going to have an ongoing pipeline fill for this role over here. Well, why? A recruiter would say, okay, not a problem. Ching, turn my meter on and start working. Why is it always empty? Or why are you always having a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And then that starts flowering out into all these different areas that then I created into, or what I call people pipelines. And how you go about attracting, recruiting, and retaining, those are different pipelines that should always be filled. And incorporating that from anyone in financial services will understand this. It's like being a works with your attorney and your CPA to make sure everything is pulled together. Whereas, say, a financial rep, a registered rep, would think more about himself and not work with all these other entities, thinking they're going to take away my pie.
Right.
Yeah. So this is about incorporating everything and making things more efficient. And here's the truth. You had mentioned something, and I can't remember the book. I wish I could remember the book. But in the book, it was talking about when we're going through different phases of community growth, and that includes like forms of industrialization, health issues, the whole gamut. And just talking about the availability of jobs and the job markets, as automated machinery are taking over American jobs, as convenient as they are, now we're in a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in between another era. So we're moving on to another era, and we have to let go of the industrialized version and move forward. What do you think the people were going to do when they stopped using whale blubber to light up lamps?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, son of a gun, this is what happens every single time. And that is ding, ding, literally the light bulb. Thomas Edison invents the light bulb. And guess what? Now we all have light bulbs, and those are starting to, now that's going to be at the term of like the whale blubber days. So if we continue to want to move forward, wanting is a big key of that. And that's where a lot of the people strategies comes into, is preparing you for, sweetheart, you got to let go. We have to move forward into something that's bigger, better, emerging. You can't keep holding on to the coal industry. we need to progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did I just ramble on too much?
No, not at all. I think that was absolutely perfect. And it's a very valuable service, being able to plug those in together and thinking that progressively of what that shift and that change is going to be. And I think in particular, with the folks that are starting college right now, that are entering college, and we've been conditioned for so long to say, hey, you know what, this is the path that you go, and there's kind of been a vacate of a little bit in terms of some of the more on hand skills, some of the whether it's the woodworking classes, those types of classes in school, vocational type programs. And to be able to have the pipeline strategies to help either companies or also individuals navigate through that, that's a pretty cool thing, Kim.
Thanks. And something that I offered in a couple of posts is, and it might have only been on LinkedIn, but that is it, and it ties back into the Last Prison Project. People who are now having their records stripped clean, they now have a huge gap in their resume as well as skill set, especially those who are incarcerated for more than 3 years. And we all know that when you come out, you end up going back into the system. That's how it's created.
Yep.
Call me. I'll help you through this. The cannabis industry is very open, warm arms. They understand this, and other companies are turning that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take some advice and guidance moving through all that.
Yep.
So I'm happy to coach you through some of that. Please get a hold of me.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. So, Kim, I think that wraps it up for this edition of the Speaking Bluntly podcast. And for our listeners, please like, share, subscribe, and also check out all of our different platforms that we have. So, again, the Harvest Plume Facebook page. We also have the Cannabis Sessions page. You can go check that on Facebook. And then for Kim's professional work as well, don't forget about the pipelinestrategies.com. And do us one more favor, if you can, is to jump over to rogue420.net and bookmark that and check that site out daily for news, everything related to advocacy, the business side of it, everything else like that. So, Kim, thank you for a great show today, and we'll be back next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.
Perfect. Take
care.
All
right. Thank you.
Bye.